Josh, let's talk about metrics. So you started 5 years ago at
That's like
ComScore.
5 years ago, yeah.
You had important metrics then, maybe uniques. I don't know how old that concept is. Now we're talking page views. So what metrics are very important to you now, and what do you see maybe happening as far as metrics are concerned in measurement over the next couple of years?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. A couple of things. I hope I can keep all my thoughts straight here. When I started at ComScore, it was all about uniques and page views, but uniques is a loaded term. It's less loaded nowadays. But the question that I think we have to ask in digital when you hear the phrase uniques is unique what? Because the truncation of the phrase has led to all sorts of confusion and complications, because we often have conversations with publishers who say, you show my uniques here and my internal numbers show my uniques here. Well, that's because these are unique visitors and these are unique cookie browsers. If we just finished the phrase, we clear up the hole. So unique isn't a unique, isn't a unique. I'm old school, you know, if I'm not careful, I'll still just call it reach. But I think, you know, there was a whole, you know, if you think back to what was going on in media 5 or 6 years ago, engagement was, the phrase engagement was a really hot topic. And so there was a lot of initiatives afoot to try and figure out a way to measure and quantify engagement. I continue to think that duration is a really important metric. Time spent, you know, especially by the way, you know. So now you see digital. So oftentimes we hear that one of the trends in media is convergence, but I think a bigger trend is divergence, right? Because what happens is you know, it's like when the first fish wriggles out onto the land and starts walking. You know, the content gets up and leaves the device we assumed the content was associated with. So you don't need a TV to watch TV. You don't need a radio to listen to the radio. You don't need a magazine to read a magazine. So we assumed that digital or the internet came through one of these. But now that's not the case anymore. So as digital sort of diverges from the computer and starts spreading to, you know, phones and tablets and gaming consoles and, you know, toasters and refrigerators, the nature of the content and the way it's consumed is changing. And I think that obviously the way a lot of it is changing is, you know, bandwidth is you know, there's more and more bandwidth. So there's a lot more video consumed, a lot more video, a lot of rich media. And then there are things that aren't video at all, but that are still not consumed in terms of pages, but more in terms of time spent, like gaming, for example. You spend time with a game, but you're certainly not turning the page when you look at a game. So I'm a big believer, and have been really, I guess, since I've been at ComScore, in the importance of duration as a metric, time spent. Obviously, online video is becoming more and more important, and video is always measured in terms of you know, reach and time spent. You know, those are the two things that make up an average minute or an average quarter-hour inning. So I think those are the two important metrics. The other thing that's happening is, so we know on digital that people, you know, so you know, if you ask my mom or someone like my mom, she would say, okay, you know, people go to websites, and sometimes, and websites have ads, don't they? But the ads don't always get there from the website naturally. You know, sometimes there's direct sales, but an awful lot of the inventory that you see online comes from other places, from networks, from exchanges. So, in point of fact, you know, and then there's real-time bidding and you know, where an audience targeting. So in digital, you have advertisers seeking audiences and getting ads in front of the audiences and actually leaving out the media vehicle in between. You know, a cookie presents itself to an ad server, and then there's a bid to see who wants to spend the most money to reach that cookie based on the demographic characteristics associated with that cookie. And by the way, nowhere in this conversation needs there be a consideration of what the content is. Subsequently, it's becoming increasingly important to be able to measure audiences to advertising, to campaigns. So I think that, you know, for you know, I guess I'm going to break the fourth wall here and say, so for your viewers, for the people who are reading this or watching this, if you're wondering why, when you read about companies like ComScore, you're used to media metrics and audience measurement, which was so much like, the traditional TV ratings or radio ratings. Why is there so much emphasis nowadays on products like VCE, where we provide audiences to schedules or campaigns? And the reason is because increasingly you cannot build the audience to a campaign out of the audience to media vehicles. So think about a TV schedule. If I know that, it's really easy. If I know where I bought my time, if I bought 10 spots and each spot was on a show that had a 4 rating, then I know I had 40 gross rating points. 10 spots times 4 rating. But impressions digitally are served one at a time, so I can't look at the audience to Yahoo or Facebook, for example, and say, oh, I had an impression on Yahoo or Facebook, so I must have reached 100 million people, in excess of 100 million people. It's really a question of which individual consumers did that ad get to. And by the way, maybe I didn't go through the publisher. I think at this point it's probably fair to say more than half the inventory, but not more than half the money, goes through exchanges and networks. There's no way to say, oh, here's the websites that I bought. If I add up their audiences, what's the reach of the schedule? There's no way you can do that. The math it just isn't there. So you actually have to start evaluating. You have to evaluate campaigns digitally by evaluating the campaign itself. There's no sort of like, if I understand the audience of the vehicle, then I can roll that up to the audience of the campaign. So that's why there's so much emphasis now on the tools that give you campaign audiences.
So what about click-throughs?
Click-throughs is here's the thing with click-throughs. I think ComScore is pretty clearly not a fan of the click-through. Nothing against the click-through, but we've done papers called Beyond the Click. Basically, when the internet was birthed, and we all kind of decided, oh, it's the most measurable medium, and that's a good thing. And clicks are the easiest thing to measure, therefore, let's measure them a whole lot. But over time, let's face it, consumers have learned not to click. We have learned that it is wholly common that the vast preponderance of value of an advertising campaign comes outside of the clickers. We've also done a study called Natural Born Clickers, and I think we found that 8% of the internet population accounts for like 85% of the clicks. And by the way, guess what? It's not an upscale 8%. It's not an especially desirable 8%. So if you run a campaign and you have 8% of the population that might click on your ad, is it valueless against the other 92%? No, quite the contrary. You see attribution modeling online where we're able to quantify the effect that different exposures, different campaigns have to the ultimate purchase. So I guess what I'll say about click-throughs is this. Because they have been so darned easy to measure, they've been overemphasized. If you're a direct marketer and your goal is a click-through, then by all means, advertise to get click-throughs and buy on cost per click. But I think we all agree the future of digital is brand advertising, and brand advertisers aren't looking for a click, they're looking for a customer. And you don't make a customer with a click. You make maybe, if you're lucky, a quick sale with a click.